So I'm Maya, and I'm a doctoral researcher at Heriot University, and I'm doing a PhD there. And my research looks at how we can increase the employment of autistic people. And if you do want to have a look at my research, I've got my own website, which is www.autism-employment.com. And we have Alan.
I'm Alan Gardner. I'm a 62-year-old autistic male.
Alan is an ambassador for the National Autistic Society and a TV presenter for the Autistic Gardner. So how has lockdown been for you, Alan?
Boring. I think we're meant to enjoy autistic people. Some of us have enjoyed actually being locked down because there aren't things that you think you have to do or need to do. But I'm missing the adventures. I'm missing. I mean, is it stupid? I mean, going to the supermarket. I can't go to the supermarket. I can't just go and buy something that I want. I'm actually shielded because I'm considered to be severely clinically vulnerable because I have heart failure. So it's a lovely posh way of going, if you catch this, you're dead. So that kind of really sort of sticks in your mind. So, you know, I try and keep out the way of everybody.
So how has that been for you then? How's the shielding been for you?
It depends on where. I don't go where there's lots of people, but I mean, at the moment, it's probably more dangerous at the moment now than it's ever been because people sort of relax and they don't bother to keep their distance. You know, when it first started, everybody used to cross the road and sort of, some do. I've stepped to a side in a drive to let somebody pass and they've looked at me as if I'm completely weird. Or the best one is they totally ignore me, which really winds me up because then I end up standing on somebody's drive going, no, that's fine. I don't mind getting out of your way, you know? And it really, really annoys me. But now the nice weather's returned, so I can go to the allotment and do some gardening.
Are you looking forward to getting back into that, the gardening side of things?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing something. I mean, I've got plenty of work. I've got design work, and I've been doing that remotely. So, you know, I designed a garden last year in Germany. And it's all done via Zoom and photographs of the concepts. They send me the dimensions, etc. And then weirdly, when it's all finished, to get the drawing rolled up, stick it in the tube, stick a stamp on it, and take it to the post box. The post office has been one of the furthest places I have visited in the last 12 months. It's at least 20 minutes walk away. Which then turns out to be 3 hours walk away because I have to keep running up and down people's drives to avoid them. You know, I don't know. I just miss autistically. I'm quite strange in some respects. I actually like people, and I sort of miss people. I miss going to see the clients. I miss going on trains. You know, I used to go on trains everywhere. I used to go all over the country. I used to fly on airplanes to go and see clients. And now the furthest I've been is the post box.
See, it's the things we took for granted before, isn't it? All these little things and seeing people and meeting people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like sports, but I was quite happy thinking about running out there and having a game of football with somebody. I don't know, but
So
no, it's not. It's had its moments. You know, been depressed about the whole thing, but I never try and worry about something I have no control over. If I have control over something, then I can do something about it. So why I can't worry about the virus? I have no control over it.
Very true.
I've already had my first vaccination. So.
That's incredible.
Got my second one to come. I can feel the antibodies creeping in my legs, you know. But I'm still not going to go running out and start hugging people.
So what are
I
you
think those days have gone.
what are you looking forward to doing then once we get out?
I don't know, just to go out there and sort of experience things. I make it sound like I go to lots of pubs and cafes and social groups, and I don't. I'm very unsociable. We never have people around here for meals. I never go to anybody else's house. I'd never dream of going to a pub or a restaurant. Me and Mandy, my wife, have done it occasionally, but it's not high on my list of something to do. I don't like the noise of it. I don't feel stupid sat there eating in front of other people.
Are there any changes that you think that we should keep going forward once we come out of lockdown?
I don't know. Everybody goes for a walk. Have you noticed that? Nobody goes for a walk. And then the Prime Minister says we can go for a walk and everybody's walking.
That's true.
It's one of the few exercises I can do safely. As long as I don't overdo it. I can do a few thousand steps a day. But I can't go anywhere where there's a hill. A steep slope, and that would be the end of me. So, I have to kind of stay roughly, sounds fun, I'm always on the level. Always have to go everywhere on the level because I can't climb up a hill with heart failure.
And how about working from home? How have you found that? Do you think that's something we should keep? I feel like working from home has been something that's really probably been one of the good things from lockdown. It's been quite nice working from home. What do you think?
I've always worked from home, so there's actually no difference. I mean, I have a drawing board and I'm at home and I draw the pictures. All that's missing for me is the actual traveling and the actual going there and the actual coming back and the actual staying over. I know this sounds very un-autistic, but actually I'm a bit of a reverse autistic, I think. It's quite strange because there's 18 traits apparently of autism and I have 14 of them. So I am quite autistic. But I believe we're like light switches. We either love something or we hate something. I like people. I like loud noises. I like bright lights. And they're all the reverse to what people consider autistic people are like.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like all autistic people are different, and it's sometimes autistic people are very easily painted with the same brush, but it's not. Everyone is different, just like everyone else, isn't it?
Yeah, even more so. It's not a diagnosis. It's a different way of thinking. It's not a condition. It's not a disorder. And I personally, I'd like to point out, he personally hate that ruddy rainbow that we're all on a spectrum. Makes us sound like fairy characters on a twinkling bow. We're all different. We're all individuals, and I think what's really important, as far as I'm concerned, is if anybody wants to help an autistic person, is to allow them to be autistic. That's where the nitty of all this has now ended up. We appear to be in a time in this world now where everybody is trying to stand up and get acceptance. The gay community, the race, creed, color, sexuality, they're all standing up for themselves and they all want to be different. And autism is no more different than any of those. It is a mental way of thinking about things. And I think we should all go out and do marches with banners with rainbows on. No, don't do that. It's not going to be good.
So, Alan, what is your story? Tell us more about you.
At the grand old age of 55, somebody suggested I was autistic. But it wasn't just somebody. My middle child, Reese, was at college. in Birmingham. He was 18 years old, and they thought he might be dyslexic. So they decided they could have a little quick chat to him and discover that. I wasn't going to take part, but I ended up going, for want of a better word, parents' evening. And a cancellation came up, and it was straight after that he had to go and see this man. So I said I'd sit outside, and he said, no, come and sit in. 30 minutes later, he said, I think there's something I should tell you both. I believe you both have Asperger's syndrome. How you can change somebody's life in one sentence, about 5 words, is totally unbelievable. But it was my doing, because autistically, weirdly, I was either going to accept that and run with it, or I was going to totally ignore it. And I accepted it and ran with it. And here we are.
And how has life been since then?
Doing things that I thought I would never end up doing. I had no support, obviously, for 55 years. I mean, when I was at school, autism was not really clearly understood. So I was never going to get any support. I never looked for support. I never thought I was any different. I know it was ruddy weird. And I did things in a very different way. But I didn't think somebody could actually print off a piece of paper and go, there you go, that's you written on it, which I saw on the computer and went, oh dear. I was ticking boxes like there was no tomorrow. So it turned out that my 3 children were also autistic, but we didn't bring them up to be autistic because we didn't know that I was autistic. And then only a couple of years ago, we found out my wife was also. So the children really didn't stand a chance. There was going to be autistic. And yes, this is inherited. This is nothing to do with atomic energy coming from rocks or vaccinations. This is something that different chromosomes and different ways of thinking.
And how about then your journey to become an ambassador for the National Autistic Society and going on to do the Autistic Gardener? How did that come about? And
the Autistic Gardener happened about 3 months after somebody told me I was autistic. It was almost as if it was sort of, you believe in fate. A producer contacted me wanting to do a gardening program with autistic trainees and was looking for someone to lead them. But they wasn't looking for an autistic person to lead them because that would have been stupid, wouldn't it? And they said that I said that I had Asperger's, and she said, yes, they have Asperger's. And I said, no, I do. And there was a silence. And 3 days later, a woman turned up in our house with a camera, filmed for about 3 hours, went out the door saying, you do realise 90% of this doesn't go anywhere, but they're going to love you. And she went out the door, and then so it went. And about 3 months later, it was commissioned by Channel 4.
Oh, that sounds excellent. And how about becoming an ambassador? How did that come about?
I was doing things and helping the NAS before I did the Autistic Gardener. They assisted me in getting a diagnosis because basically my doctor didn't want to know.
Okay.
He said that I was 55 and I obviously wasn't psychologically stressed over it. So why did I need to know? Of course you need to know. You need a diagnosis to understand who you are and understand the reasonings why you thought the way you did. It's the only condition I've ever seen on Twitter where people have tweeted, I had my test today and I'm autistic. And then everybody sends congratulations. And some people have said that's weird. Why are you congratulating him? Well, we're congratulating him because he now understands what his life has been all about. And it now makes it clear, and it makes him clear the way forward. We're talking round pegs in square holes. I always discovered very early on that I could do something in this world, and I could manipulate this world to make round holes for my round peg, you know, and find ways of doing things. We can't expect the human race to change doing everything just to accommodate us, but we can always find our own little niche.
Definitely. And can we touch on self-acceptance? So you said that when you found out you had autism and you knew you either accept it and you go on with it, or there was the option. Could you talk more about the self-acceptance and how you felt? And
there is, you see, for me in this world, there is no middle ground. There's no grey area. I either do something and I do it incredibly well, or I totally ignore it. I have to be good at doing something to justify doing something. You don't just, you know, totter about in the middle. A lot of us, there's a lot of autistic people that don't accept being autistic. And in some respects, that's a shame. But I know it's having the self-confidence and the awareness of knowing who you are if you're actually going to pull something off like that. I'm autistic and I'm proud to be autistic. And I know because we're all so different that some of us really struggle through our lives because of being autistic. You know, sensory overload, meltdowns. I think one of the biggest problems that I've got, I've always claimed I've never had anxiety. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't get anxiety. But when I'm about to do something like step onto a stage of 500 people who have all come to listen to me talk for an hour and a half, I get excited. Now, that sensation I call excited. Maybe that sensation is anxiety. I don't know. I don't know how I feel, which makes it not difficult, but it makes it difficult to put names on things, you know, of how you feel emotionally, because emotionally I feel differently.
so what does autism mean to you then? How do you feel about autism? What does autism mean to you?
To me personally, obviously it's been a very good thing. I never look back. I never try and go back and think this happened, that happened because of it. It's never worth doing that. So I never sit down and analyze. So I take each day as it comes. If I was going to do something tomorrow, like going to London or something like that, I would actually paint a picture in my head of the train station, the train, where I'd sit on the train, what's out the window of the train, what it's like when I get there, and then sort of when I actually live it, it kind of fits the picture that I previously made of that journey and makes me feel comfortable about it. Because it is, they tend to call it hyper focus now, so it's actually used to be called sort of special interest, where we would take up a hobby or whatever. For me, gardening, been gardening since I was 15 years old. So you take that, it's called a special interest, but people think it's an obsession because you do nothing else but. And it's not an obsession, it's a place of safety, it's a place of knowledge and a place of comfort. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to gardening, and it makes me feel comfortable. And I would quite happily go and talk to thousands of people about what I do because I know it inside out. And that is something that's comforting in rather a strange, weird way in this world, this weird world that we're living in at the moment.
Especially at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I can still garden, nobody stops me doing that.
Okay. So what do you want people to know about autism? Say if we mention 5 things or or however many things you want to mention, what do you want others to know about autism?
As far as I'm concerned, it's very simple. We are autistic. We are not a broken computer with a different operating system. For some of us, that can cause great stress and anxiety, and can cause a lot of physical effects that sometimes will go with it. What we need as autistic people is just to be left to be autistic. If we need support, that support is there. But if an autistic person wants to do something some way, he should be able to do it. He shouldn't be shunned upon. There's a lovely story that in Jersey, when we visited last, there is a pink granite sea defence wall that runs for about 2.5 miles, and it's about waist height. And I've always said to my wife Mandy that I wanted to drive a toy car up it. And when we was there last, we went to a toy shop and it was shut. At this time, I'm going to take a toy car with me. I like toy cars. And I'm going to drive it from one end of the beach to the other, and it will give me great pleasure. But that isn't what a 62-year-old bloke does unless he's mentally ill. Do you know what I mean? It's just accepting people for who they are and allow people to do what they want to do. What I always found strange was the people that would come up to me and say, I would love to have pink hair like that. You're so brave. There's no bravery in dyeing your hair pink. You know, fighting in the First World War, going over the trenches, getting shot at. That's bravery, not buying a bottle of hair dye at £5.75 in your local supermarket and sticking it on your head. People's perceptions, autistic people and neurotypicals, just generally people tend to worry about what other people think about what they're doing. And we've all got to live our lives. And if we want to be happy, then we need to be allowed to live our life how we want to live it.
You're absolutely right. Okay, let's talk misconceptions. What are the misconceptions about autism that we need to clarify?
The best way to do that is to say the things that people say to you. You don't look autistic. I don't know what an autistic look is. When I first got a diagnosis, one of my friends actually turned around and said, I'm really sorry, I hear you've caught autism. Somebody actually asked me how long had I had autism. Misconception there is that children are autistic and somehow they no longer become autistic when they become adults. Interesting. Girls are never autistic. Oh, yes, they are. They're just really good at hiding it. They're really good. It's something we call masking, and we can go through life masking and pretending to do things that are more acceptable. And in doing so, actually causes violent breakdowns and emotional destruction. There's people that have gone on for 20 years and then just had a complete mental breakdown because they go through life pretending to be somebody that they're not. And that is very damaging. So there's just as many girls. I mean, the autism diagnosis over here isn't as big as in America. But that's only because we're not that good at finding autistic people. At the moment, as the system goes, it's really, really difficult to get a diagnosis. And it's really, really difficult to get a doctor to understand what autism is all about, because they're using a system that is so archaic. You can't be autistic, you're making eye contact. You know, I can't be autistic because I'm married and I've got 3 children. I can't be autistic because I've got empathy. We're not meant to be empathetic. We're not meant to understand people. I have that much frigging empathy that I have to avoid certain situations because I'll just end up crying constantly. I can empathize. I can love another person. I can bring up children. I can drive a car. But I mean, as it stands at the moment, you know, about 16% of autistic people haven't got full-time jobs. They're more likely at school to be naughty. They're far more likely to be expelled because people are not understanding what they need. I think I actually went through the system of not really noticing that there was a system. So I went through school and I only had 3 CSEs and I didn't go back to get them because they were not in my head important. So as a consequence of that, I've gone down on the census form as white British male, no qualifications, doesn't work very many hours and is chronically ill because there was no box there for superhero and there was no box there for me tick for fabulous. But, you know, I'm going to go down in history as a failure on the census.
We need to get those boxes added in.
You need to get those boxes added straight away. It's if you read a diagnosis thing like that, if you just read what people who are autistic are meant to be, if you ran a company and someone came to work there, because he's autistic, you'd stick him in the darkest corner, lowest light, put some ear defenders on him because he doesn't like the sound. It's bizarre. People need to be asked what they want and what makes them comfortable. And for that matter, diversity is everybody. So why shouldn't everybody be allowed to do things and have things to accommodate them rather than to accommodate a group of people? You know, I know you can't be your own person in the army when everybody, goes to war in tanks and you're in the tank going the opposite direction because you're an individual. I understand that's really, not a sensible thing to do, but it's all about once you've met an autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and you can't claim you know others until you've met others.
What can be done better by employers within work?
Presently, for employers, the actual way you get a job and the way you actually get an interview is biased towards neurotypicals. I mean, to go and have an interview for a lot of autistic people would be great anxiety and great stress. The fact that if they're not making eye contact and they're not making the movements and the things that they're expected to, they're not given the job, even if they are superior or would be superior at that job, which some of autistic people could do certain tasks and certain jobs that better than any neurotypical could ever. So now things have to change about how you do an interview. They also judge everybody on examination results, don't they? Although majority of autistic people are incredibly brilliant at doing examinations. My 3 children have got O levels, A levels. 2 of them went to university, and one's got a BA honours degree. There's nothing in being autistic that means that you're not capable of doing things. But autistically, you have to understand yourself and you have to know what your limits are and how far you can go with things, and also understand that maybe this afternoon I shouldn't really try and do that. I should just take it easy, but not feel guilty for taking it easy. Because I always found I would break everything down. So I would spend the day traveling somewhere. And then the following day, I gave a talk, say, at Worthing Theatre. And then the following day, I would come back rather than try and wedge it all into a short time span. But always, the day after I had done a talk, my eyes would feel like they'd been pushed into the back of my head and there was nothing in my sockets. And that's what being autistic had done to me, that I could be social and outward at that sort of respect, but it would nail me at a latter point. A lot of us use the term spoons. So we in our mind's eye have a collection of spoons for that day, and every task and everything that we do requires the energy of a spoon, and we lose a spoon. And then when we run out of spoons, we have to stop. Doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock at night, we have to stop when we run out of spoons, because if we don't, we're using tomorrow's spoons. And if we continue to do that by about day 3, we're completely exhausted.
Absolutely. Okay. Reflecting back on life, Alan, what would you tell your younger self?
My younger self, I'd say, don't worry, you little weirdo. You will get a lot weirder. I like, at school, I was bullied heavily. I think you can imagine, and I wasn't wearing makeup then either. So, or I had pink hair, but I still got bullied. It's almost as if people smell you out. Oh, he's vulnerable. Let's have a go at him. I absolutely loved it when I left school and I could do my own thing, and go and find a job and earn my own money and decide which direction I was going in. I've always been like that. I would say that to anybody. You can never, whatever you want to do, you can never fail at that as long as you never give up, never stop giving up trying. If you don't try, you don't get there. If you keep trying, you'll never fail.
What more advice would you give to others, perhaps with similar experiences as you? What would you say to others?
Very easy for me to say things like that because those people, suffer in many ways. But there is always ways of sorting things out and doing what you want to do, and being persistent about where you want to be. You can't score a goal unless you take part in a football match. I found out very early with my gardening that there was no way I could do that without having other people with me and without having gardens and things like that. So it wasn't a solitary experience. So I had to learn how to sort of engage with people who were doing that. And they was always impressed by my superior plant knowledge because I just absorb everything like a sponge. So I'd remember everything about everything. It's just deciding what you want to do in life and deciding where you want to go with that. Because at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot shorter than you think. The years fly by quite quickly. I think it was John Lennon, wasn't it, who was actually asked at school what did he want to be when he grew up, and he said happy.
So important, isn't it? It's something when we're younger, we don't. When we grow up, we think when we grow up, I want to become this and this, and we've got all these ideas. But you're right, it's about achieving happiness, and it's about being happy and content, isn't it?
I think as the years have gone by, I think I've got happier. I think that's down to the reason that I know what makes me happy. I know what makes me feel comfortable. I've also got to the point that if I have a problem and I'm worrying about something, I even know why I'm worrying about that and how I can stop worrying about that. It's sort of really getting to know yourself as a person. And it's also in the outside world out there, it's all about confidence. It's all about believing in yourself. What's it? RuPaul Drag Race says, if you can't love yourself, how can you love others? And that is true. You need to understand yourself and be aware of yourself and be confident about who you are, to go out in that wide world. And I'm sure that one day we'll be allowed to go back out into that wide world.
Fingers crossed, very, very soon.
Yeah.
Excellent. Alan, thank you so much. It's been great to catch up, and it was great to run through these questions with you.
Is there anything you want to know?
When we go through something, or perhaps that's an autism diagnosis, or perhaps that's something else. You're right. We see two options. We see like accept it and make the best out of it, but we also see the other options, just really not accepting it. And I really admire how you've accepted it and just really grabbed hold of it. And
I spoke the other day when I was doing a webinar to a doctor, and she asked me if I was going to mention Phil. Now, Phil's my defibrillator that shocks me if I go into cardiac arrest. And I said, no, I wasn't going to mention it unless somebody brought it into the conversation. And she said she used my example of Phil and I on a weekly basis to children who were suffering with heart problems and had to have defibrillators. And she would tell them the story about Alan with his friend Phil, who would support him if anything went wrong. Brought me to tears to think that there's some children out there have took some comfort from the fact of having a device put inside them that can actually shock them at its own will and fancy. If it decides they need shocking, it will shock them. But here is a man who called his Phil and sees him as someone who looks after him, someone not to be frightened of. And if I didn't talk about stuff like that, that wouldn't happen. And if I didn't talk about being autistic, then other autistic people could be ignored, or somebody somewhere. You know, you go and give a talk as ambassadors of the NAS, and I always thought if one person walked out that room and understood something better than he did, and we need to talk freely. I need to, I want to talk about Phil, who shocks me, even if he blows me out of bed at 2:30 in the morning. I've got heart failure. I've only got 20% of my heart left. And what's going to happen, everybody knows. Over a matter of time, my heart will deteriorate and I will die. I will die of organ failure. That might be next week. That might be the month after. That might be the year after. But just take each day as it comes and just move forward. It's been 3.5 years now. They gave me a 10% chance of survival in the first year. So what do? Do you sit at home and wait to die? Or do you carry on? And also what I didn't want to do, and I could never understand this. So because of this, I should now be trying to raise money to climb Mount Everest, or to climb Ben Nevis, or to do a London marathon with heart failure. Why? Because to prove to people that I can do it, even though I had no intention of doing it before heart failure, why the hell should I think now is a good time to try anything? And it's also knowing, it's also not looking back and thinking you could do this and you could do that and you could do this, but now you can't. That's not the way to think about it. You think about it in the terms of what I can do now, not what I can't do. You can't, and it's the same being autistic. If being autistic doesn't allow me to do certain things, and I don't sit there thinking I can't do this because I'm autistic. And sometimes I think diagnosis is very much like that. Somebody says that I'll admit freely that when I was diagnosed, it was only a couple of months after that I was faced with something. And I thought, I really don't feel comfortable doing that because I'm autistic. And I thought, hang on, if this had happened 6 months ago, I would have just done it. Why am I now thinking I can't do it? So it's knowing, particularly with the heart, because I need to exercise the heart, because if I don't, it will give up on me. But I can't afford to over exercise it because I'll strain it and it won't last as long as it could. So in this sort of limbo-y, floaty sort of bit. So I just carry on. And I also cannot, and this really annoys the hell out of me, my silver lining in my head. You could look back at 3.5 years ago when I had heart failure and say, you know, that was a bad thing. But I look at that and think, I've now got a defibrillator in me. I now am 10 different medications. What could have happened is I could have just dropped down dead 3 months later. But now I'm less likely to die. And maybe because of the drugs and the defibrillator, I'm going to live longer than I would have if this hadn't happened. And that's the only way I can see life. And I know some people would find that really annoying, but I can only see the good and the positive, and it's always there. It is always there, whatever situation you're in. There's always a bright light, and it's not always a train coming the other way.
Very inspiring. I think that's something we can all take from that, and we can all implement that in our lives and see things more positively and take that approach in life, especially in these difficult times, especially during lockdown, especially during COVID. That's really, really inspiring. Thank you for sharing that.